Hello and welcome to the Bloodstream podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I am your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm your guest host and blood brother, Marc, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare provider before making any treatment decision.
Nailed it. On today's show, it's part one of our Bloodstream podcast Blood Brother collaboration featuring the voices of numerous blood brothers from across the country. Marc co-hosted the discussion with me, and now he's here in studio to co-host this episode and the next two as we give the show over to this special Blood Brother discussion. We've got all that and more on today's episode. Welcome to Bloodstream. And if you like what you hear, please share this episode on social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Bloodstream podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the Bloodstream podcast is indeed made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right, Takeda. Takeda's got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes in a world free of bleeds. Isn't that great, Marc?
That's amazing. That's incredible.
And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. And you can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time for the folks in the back, that's bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the Bloodstream podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda. Well, Marc, welcome to studio. Welcome to Bloodstream. It's great having you in here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Patrick. This has been a great collaboration, and it's been an honor to be here with you today.
So today, this episode is dedicated to the Blood Brothers, fellow men like Marc and I who are affected by bleeding disorders. We recently met with about 16 fellow Blood Brothers to share lived experiences on one of a few pre-selected topics based on some community survey work that Marc will tell us about in just a little bit. It was an amazing and vulnerable conversation that we'll be bringing you here on Bloodstream in 3 parts. Marc has generously agreed to join me here in studio for these episodes, giving Amy a break until January. So that's nice. I'm sure she appreciates that. Marc, before we dive in, though, would you please give the audience a little background on yourself, as well as on the Blood Brotherhood program from the Hemophilia Federation of America?
Absolutely. Thanks, Patrick. So I'm happy to talk a little more about myself. I am Marc, like Patrick said. I am the Director of Health Equity and Community Engagement at the Hemophilia Federation of America. I also help out with the Blood Brotherhood program that HFA started many years ago, has served as a sort of a safe space, safe ground for blood brothers who have struggles with their condition or outside of their condition. We're very proud of that program. We're looking to grow it in many different ways, and thanks to Patrick and Believe Limited for giving us a chance to go even further. So we're really excited to share these stories with you, and I'll pass it back to Patrick.
Yeah, so Marc, based on this survey work, we identified the 4 priority topics: complicated grief, being new to the community, wearing multiple hats in the community, and challenges across the lifespan. Each participant had about 4 minutes to share on the topic of their choosing, and those shares are what we're bringing you here today, starting with Marc.
Oh, happy to be voluntold to go first.
Yeah, well, you set a great example, and the audience will get to hear that in just a few minutes. But before we dive in, do you want to say a few words about these topics and how they were chosen?
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. I'd love to just talk a little more about these topics before we dive into them. So as Patrick mentioned, there are 4 priority topics we discussed: complicated grief, being new to the community, wearing multiple hats in the community, and challenges across the lifespan. Before I jump into these topics, were chosen as priority topics because they're topics we've heard a lot over the course of both of our work, my work as within the bleeding disorder community, running these types of breakout sessions with blood brothers and other groups within bleeding disorders. And these are the topics that came up, but I felt like haven't really been given the opportunity to be fully talked about and shared. So I wanted to use this podcast to bring those to light, see if they resonate with people, and hopefully you learn something new or find something that you wanted to say but didn't know what to call it. So kicking it off with complicated grief, that's a recognized term in psychology that describes a type of grief that's not related to or tied to any specific situation, like a death in the family or a traumatic event. It's more of just an overall reflection on things like lost opportunities, chances not taken, lives you could have led if or didn't lead because of your circumstances. In the context of bleeding disorders, it seems fairly obvious to us, but sometimes it's hidden. So, for example, if you're worried about health insurance and getting a good job that pays well and can cover you, can cover your medications, you may not thinking about pursuing your passion or finding your dream job or pursuing what you really want to do with your life because you need to make sure that you have medication and health insurance, which may not come in hand with a passion type job.
Right.
You have things like activities hobbies or interests that maybe you feel like you would want to try. Things like maybe surfing or rock climbing, but you've been told like, no, you can't do that. You have a bleeding disorder. You may have a bleed. What happens if this, and that? And then it's just easier to pick something else, but you'll always sort of feel it that you didn't get a chance to express yourself and challenge yourself in the way that you wanted. So that's what complicated grief is. It's just an accumulation of all of those types of situations and the impact they have on you mentally and emotionally throughout the lifespan, which I'll get into in a second. And being new to the community. So for many people with bleeding disorders, fortunate to be diagnosed at birth, whether that's just, you show signs of bleeding, which is unfortunate, or have a family history. But as diagnosis is getting better, as recognition of people who can have bleeding disorders has increased, we're seeing a lot of people who are diagnosed later in their life, in their teens, in their 20s, or even beyond their 30s or 40s, and they're new to all of this world that comes with having a bleeding disorder. Right. There's national organizations, there's local organizations, there's hematologists, there's the hemophilia treatment centers, or bleeding disorder treatment centers, there's health insurance. There's so much, it can be so overwhelming. At the same time, once you get into the community and see the amount of resources, the amount of support, that in itself can also be overwhelming. As great as all of that is,
good point.
This is a whole new world that you have to basically explore, make time for. And as we all know, we're more than our bleeding disorders. We have our lives outside of it that need to be managed. So we want to recognize that being new to the community, the bleeding disorder community, can come with its own challenges. It may provide an amazing place of support and trust, but it can be incredibly overwhelming. And the next topic is wearing multiple hats in the community. It's no secret that a lot of our bleeding disorder community members also professionally work in the bleeding disorder, what we call industry. That's generally means working for a specialty pharmacy that dispenses bleeding disorder drugs. That can mean working for a manufacturer, a pharmaceutical manufacturer, being the sort of representative of the organization to the patient community. But I also take that to mean working on the sort of nonprofit, the patient organization side. So working, again, at the local bleeding disorder patient organization or a national organization like myself, there are challenges. For example, some organizations, as is their prerogative, they prefer not to have a pharmaceutical representative or especially pharma representative in their breakout sessions or private sessions.
Right.
But if you are a person with a bleeding disorder in that role, you lose out on the benefits of participating in the community and finding support.
Totally.
And similar to working on the nonprofit side or the community side, I myself have experienced where my work is making sure that people receive the educational resources, get the support, making sure that they're thriving. But me as a person with severe hemophilia A, there were many instances where I felt like, oh, I'm doing all of this. I'm giving my all to make sure everybody else is okay, but I'm not okay. But I need to, in this role, because this is my profession, have that identity first and foremost. And I didn't realize the impact of what not having a community, being able to participate in it, and being able to seek the support that I needed in favor of trying to make sure that I'm doing my job as a professional and also making sure that people are okay and getting the resources they need. I'll put myself on the back burner, and that hurt me more than I recognized at the time.
Of course.
Thank you. And the last topic we talked about is challenges across the lifespan. As we can see, as you age with a bleeding disorder, when you're born, in general, biggest issue are bleeds, constant bleeds, managing your condition, trying to figure out what you can and can't do, telling your parents, telling your school, your school administrators. It's very, very clear what the issues are. But once you get a good handle on it in your teens, maybe, or even in your 20s, you feel like, yeah, I can have an identity outside of my hemophilia. I can focus on, participating in things that I couldn't before, have experiences, build an identity or personality or character outside of bleeding disorder.
Right.
We see a lot of people between 18 and 26 kind of step away from the community to be able to just build a life outside of bleeding disorders, to see who they are,
Right.
because they're in their childhood and maybe in their teens, their life was defined by their bleeding disorder, excuse me. But as we see people in their 30s and 40s, when life starts to happen and more complications and just all the issues that come with aging in general start piling up, financial responsibilities, family responsibilities, we see the need for community again. We see people coming back into the community, looking for support, looking for other people, looking for resources. Changing jobs or losing jobs means loss of insurance or changes in insurance, and there's just so much to manage. And then as you get older in their 50s and 60s and beyond, if are fortunate enough to be able to move to age that far along, we see just normal comorbidities, heart disease, liver disease, cardiovascular disease,
all
obesity,
the old people stuff.
all the old people stuff, which is compounded by having a bleeding disorder. If you have joint damage, the idea of going out and exercising or making an exercise routine, it is more complicated. It's a little more complex. There's a lot more consideration factors. And, it's very easy to just kind of give up. And that's something that I've heard a lot of our who I call the veterans, have sort of managed it. And I feel like that's something we're not talking about, how how your needs and how you engage with your hemophilia, both on a personal and external capacity, how that changes throughout your lifespan. So long-winded way of saying, we want to identify where at each point can we focus on for your age, for a general age range, and maybe find more opportunities to grow resources, find new ways of support. So again, we're all really excited for this topic and all the other topics to hear about from our participants. So thank you, Patrick, for allowing me to dive into those.
Tremendous overview, very helpful. So with that, let's dive in. Let's hear from you and the rest of the Blood Brothers right after this. This next segment is brought to you by Genentech. If you're living with a bleeding disorder like hemophilia A, staying active may be important to you. Genentech gets it, and they're excited to help connect you with their team and with the vibrant community of people living with hemophilia A. Genentech offers one-on-one support from experts and provides resources where you can hear real stories from people living with hemophilia, learn about events that you can go to, and discover how the hemophilia community manages physical activity with a bleeding disorder. Everyone's experience is different, but there's no substitute for the support of a community that truly understands life with hemophilia A. To meet members of the community and to hear more about their hemophilia A journey, head to www.hemophiliacommunity.com. So Marc, if you feel ready to go, we'll start with you in the first share.
Happy to. Very excited. Thank you, Patrick. So I will be talking about my experience, and I'll tackle the big one, evolution of bleeding disorder-related challenges across the lifespan. That's something that's very important to me. I am a severe hemophilia A patient. I'm 38 years old. And I would honestly say over the past, 5 or so-ish years, continuing to now, hemophilia has actually taken center stage in my life in a way that I haven't experienced since I was a child. And back then when I was a kid, it was all bleeds. It was preventing, it was, you can't participate in this, you have to make sure that you're giving yourself your medication and all that stuff. Now it's just I feel the accumulation of all the issues that came with hemophilia growing up with it. The joint damage from the bleeding. Bleeding isn't actually really an issue because I'm prophylactic, with my medication, my factor. It's really all the complications that come with having hemophilia. I'm finding myself interacting with the healthcare system even more because of things like joint damage, liver issues, weight gain, just because I've lost my ability to do a lot of physical activity because of all the joint damage, managing health insurance, changing jobs, obviously my own financial responsibilities as a 38-year-old man with a hopefully family soon. And so it's all of these things where, I felt like in my 20s, so like 10, 15-ish years ago, I had a handle on everything. I was confident, I was strong, I took pride in the person I was. Like I really, once I was able to, once I started prophylaxis when I was 15 and was able to kind of build myself up physically and mentally as well, I could challenge myself, I could try new things, I could be my own person. I didn't have to be the guy with hemophilia or this weird thing that no one knows what it is. And it sounds kind of funny as a name. I could be myself. But over the past couple of years, I have found that my quality of life has dropped dramatically, particularly due to the joint damage. I can't even go for a walk for more than 30 minutes without feeling significant pain. And if I even start off the walk in like a weird way, it hurts and it destroys my whole mood. It destroys my confidence. I will say it has impacted me on a day-to-day basis because again, the things that I used to measure myself by, my physical capabilities, my ability to overcome is challenged almost on a daily basis. And so when I'm thinking about hemophilia and how it's evolved, I'm still working through it. I'm still trying to find new ways to adjust, both obviously not just physically, but emotionally or psychologically, to adjust my new realities. And, as they say, we're living longer. I'm thinking I'm 38, God willing, I'll live till I'm 80, but that means I need to keep figuring out for the next 40, 50 years how to stay alive with this damage, which has aged me significantly in a lot of ways. In terms of how I'm looking to support that, again, it's finding other people to build a support network like the Blood Brotherhood, finding opportunities to be open, to be vulnerable. When I'm at a doctor's office, I'm not going to hide anything. I'm not going to try to pretend that I'm on top of everything or that I have a handle on everything. If I'm struggling, I'm not afraid to say that anymore because that's not something I can really indulge in anymore. I can't indulge in the same mindset as I was when I felt like I was in the prime of my life. And that's a lot of maturing. It happens naturally with everybody. But I do feel like with something like a bleeding disorder or hemophilia, you have to mature quickly, very early, very quickly and very early in order to manage all of this. But you lose a lot. You lose a lot of time that you could have spent on other things. And I carry that a lot and I try to manage that the best I can.
Wow. Tremendous share, Marc. Thank you for kicking us off with such openness and vulnerability. Who would like to go next? Okay, I see Murali's hand and then Wendell. So we'll go Murali and then Wendell. Murali, you are up, my friend. Nice to see you.
Hello, everyone. I know a few of you here. So my life started in India. I was diagnosed at 4.5 years of age at the tonsillectomy. The reason for this was because there was no history in the family of hemophilia. So I started with diagnosis at a late stage, followed by an advice to use fresh whole blood as a treatment for hemophilia, because there was no such thing as factor or any equivalent available in India. At the age of 17, between 17 and 18, was the first time that I saw cryoprecipitate. And it had to be shipped from a different city over to where I was. So that was at the age of 17. So imagine the number of days that I've had to miss school. I've had to miss a whole year of high school because I had a knee injury while running around, or rather chasing my brother. I had fallen and my feet had got under the refrigerator. So that was a very bad situation. I was put in a brace, etc. I've gone all the way from using cryoprecipitate to when I came to the United States in 1989. I started with monoclonal antibody purified factor. Thankfully, it was past the HIV era. Therefore, I was not infected, and I'm still not infected with HIV or hepatitis B. Fast forward from there, I came here as a scientist, continued my research as a research scientist, and I moved on as my treatment when recombinant factor VIII was first announced as a news report, as a news release actually, by Baxter, I asked my hematologist, not at an HTC, just a regular hematologist, to start with that medication, which is now known as recombinate. And after that, moved on to using Advait and later on using the monoclonal purified Hemlibra. And now I've even moved on from Hemlibra on to Altuviiio. So I have seen the evolution of bleeding disorder related treatment across my entire lifespan. So that's my story.
And thank you for sharing it with us. So I think we've got Wendell coming up next, and then Anthony. Wendell, you are on.
Good evening, Blood Brothers. This is really awesome because in my family, there were 5 severe A hemophiliacs. And unfortunately, due to the bad blood crisis in the 80s and 90s, I'm the only one that is living today. So I'm going to do a combination, if I can, of the complicated grief and also the evolution of the bleeding disorder. The complicated grief obviously comes from losing 4 of your actual hemophiliac family members, but I'm really enjoying this forum where you all are my blood brothers. I physically had family members that were, my brother was 18 months older than I, and unfortunately he passed in 1990, but I'm glad that we had this opportunity to get together. How I became familiar with this type of forum in February of this past year, I was in ambassador training, and Believe Unlimited was there taping the session, and I got familiar with the On the Shoulder of Giants. I watched that documentary by myself, which was good because it brought up a lot of the old emotions that we've all suffered to a certain degree. And I've recently retired. I was an engineer in the auto industry for 40 years, and it was taboo to talk about your disease, only because the bad blood was out there. People don't forget that. You mentioned you have a bleeding disorder, they immediately assume that you have HIV and AIDS and that type of thing, which I am luckily undetectable, and I've been undetectable for at least 20 plus years now. And that's all due to the advances in the medication. A little bit about my treatment. I was born in 1963, so my treatment consisted of whole blood. And then in the 70s, it was the frozen plasma. And then we went to the concentrate where, it was from multiple thousands of donors, which is where the bad blood came from. And now I'm on Hemlibra, and I do treat once in a while with factor 8 for breakthrough bleeds. Obviously, being 62 years old, I do have a lot of joint damage because during the 80s and 90s, it's very scary. You didn't want to treat. That stuff was poison in our minds. So you didn't want to treat. You just powered through your bleed as much as you could. And that probably was not the right thing to do looking at hindsight, but it was also very scary times back then. And right now I'm on the Hemlibra. I take that once a month, and I went almost 3 years with 0 bleeds, which is amazing. I had a bleed a couple of days ago in my right elbow. That's one of my target joints. I'm still going to have those. My hematologist said, Wendell, you're going to have the breakthrough bleeds, but our goal is to reduce them as much as we can. But since I retired, I feel like I can actually talk about my disease. I joined the Northwest Ohio Foundation as a board member, and then they hit me up with the ambassador training and say, you have a lot of history that you need to share. And that is why I'm going for this forum type of thing, because like I said, it was taboo. You didn't talk about your disease way back when. And I'm very comfortable with this setting, with all of my blood brothers here, and I'm just looking forward to tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendell. And as one of the producers of On the Shoulders of Giants, I will say an additional thank you for that shout out. Film was made for people like you, so I'm glad it had an impact. Anthony, the floor is now yours, my friend. Go right ahead.
Okay, so hi, everybody. I'm Anthony. I am 41, and I am mild moderate hemophilia A. And right now I was just going to talk a little bit about the evolution of the bleeding disorder related challenges across the lifespan, because, I don't think any of, my story is that different than anybody else's, but I am a musical theater performer. And so growing up, dance classes, acting, singing, I was always getting injured. And I went under a recombinant relatively early. And then when I transferred to college and started working on my BFA, it was a very different world, because I came from this world where everybody knew who I was, understood that I had a bleeding disorder, into a world where it was, you will never make it in this career if you have a bleeding disorder. There's no reason for you to consider pursuing your degree. And, I fought against it, but because of that, I ended up putting myself in situations where I was bleeding relatively regularly. I constantly had bleeds in both of my iliopsoas. I had bleeds in my elbow all the time, but I was working through it to prove that I could have a career in this, because this is what I wanted to do. And, now moving forward and having a career as a musical theater performer, my body just wasn't able to keep up with me anymore. And I wasn't able to make it through dance calls. And I was having an issue with having to call out of shows because I was injured. And, as the course of treatment changed to prophylaxis, that was never really an option for me. It was always, once I got injured, then I would treat. And so I started to move into the world of education so that I could teach what I was doing and still kind of be in it tangentially, but not necessarily like doing it regularly, full out all the time, to kind of give my body a little bit of a rest. And so it's been a really interesting transition, seeing this next generation of performers coming up underneath me, where they're talking about all of their disorders and disabilities and things that they're dealing with. I haven't had a student with a bleeding disorder, but I've had students with plenty of other issues and in wheelchairs and things of that nature, where that wouldn't have been acceptable when I was younger because of my bleeding disorder. So it's been really great to be able to look back on that and have my life experiences and help those individuals say, no, you can do this. It might look different, but it's something that you're going to be able to do. But the challenges are still real. I had a compound bleed in my left thigh last year, and I was on a cane for 3 months trying to teach tap and ballet to a bunch of college students. And it's you're doing it, and it's still the pushing through. It's still multiple doses of factor per injury every time, just to try and come out on the other side, and then dealing with all the physical therapy and everything on the other end. So it's just really been an interesting evolution. I think it was Marc who was talking about how, like, as a child, there were like all of these bleeds, and then like we hit the high life. And now that we're coming down on the other side, we're dealing with all of those issues that I kind of like shoved under the rug when I was a kid, because now they're coming back to haunt me a little bit. So, losing mobility and some of that other stuff is just par for the course. And I'm going to be starting a new product soon if my insurance covers it. So after I bleed, I'll only need 1 dose because it'll last longer. So I won't necessarily need 2 or 3 doses after every bleed. And we're going to see how that goes moving forwards. That's just kind of a little bit of my journey about some of the issues I've dealt with being a mild, moderate person living with hemophilia A.
Hi, I'm Isaiah. I'm 30 years old. I have moderate hemophilia A, no inhibitors. I guess mine was more of the evolution of hemophilia, just because my family has like a family history, like I think 3 generations. And it was interesting because all of my uncles and grandparents, they had mild hemophilia, except for me. Mine was the first to have moderate. So it was like sort of I know about hemophilia. I've known about it my whole life, but it was just like the change in severity was interesting. And I guess because I was born in 95, so right as they got into the recombinant products. So luckily, me and my immediate family, we didn't have any complications with, the HIV/AIDS crisis, but my uncles did, and most of them passed due to that. But it just, I guess for me and personally, like I started on recombinant when I was younger, and then when the more modern products came out, I switched to Advate probably around like 07. And then I took that even after the longer half-life products started to come out. But then at the beginning of last year, I switched to Altuvio. And just because that was a better product for me and a much longer half-life. For a while, it was when I was on Advait, I would get bleeds maybe once a month. And then I started to change my activity as I was growing up from doing like sports and a lot of like fitness based stuff in high school because I got a bad bleed one time and psoas muscle, which is like around my stomach. Then I guess in my 20s, I started to do less physical activity and to try to lessen the number of bleeds. So then I would just I would like have my bleeding, I guess, under control, even though I didn't have like one of the longer half-life products. But I switched last year to make sure that I had a product that worked for me and didn't have to worry about bleeding as much. Just growing up, it was just interesting because I had access to things like the camps, and that kind of like for me made it worth it, because if I didn't have hemophilia, if I didn't know this from like I have like a younger sibling and an older sibling with it, and like I wouldn't have access to like communities like this one and like Blood Brotherhood, hemophilia camps, hemophilia community. And that's kind of the thing that made it, I guess, easier growing up to know that there are other people like me and other resources that I have in order to help me, I guess, lessen the burden of like having the hemophilia, because it was more than just like my immediate family that I could turn to.
Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate what you had to share. We got Mickey up next, followed by Matt, and then DJ. Mickey, good to see you, good sir, and the floor is yours.
My name is Mickey. I'm a 50-year-old hemophiliac, severe A. Just turned 50 this year, and I contracted Hep C and HIV, just like some of the other older guys. I went through most of my childhood with just whole blood, spent many, I would say probably months in the hospital throughout my childhood with bleeds. And it was like my second home. So the evolution, I saw the evolution of factor and treatment and all that stuff over the years also. A lot of grief comes from, for me, just the fact that with the whole HIV and Hep C thing, we've lost so many. So I've had a lot of family pass away. We've had a long family history of it also. And just a lot of uncles and brother and stuff pass away from that. So that's a lot of grief. And it brings on, and a lot of friends, close friends too, that actually went on and took all the medications and they passed on. And I didn't take anything probably for HIV until maybe 15 years ago. Somehow I managed to squeak through. Got real sick a couple of times, almost died, but pulled through. So that's a lot of the grief for me, is the HIV and stuff. These days, as far as grief, it comes more from the females, because I have, I got two girls that the oldest one, her levels have risen over the years. She's 16 now, but my youngest, her levels are still real low. And I think she comes in, the last time we had her checked at like 33%. Last Christmas, she woke up with me at about 3:00 in the morning, and then she ended up getting a nosebleed. That nosebleed lasted from probably about 3:30 in the morning until I think it was like 1:00 or so in the afternoon. And it was a gusher. It left her drained and wiped out. And I think of you often, Patrick, because the last few years, my employer switched insurance and went to Kaiser. And I remember you speaking about Kaiser sometimes and the situations you had. Luckily, I didn't have any troubles getting my factor. The only trouble as far as factor went was the pharmacist had way too much control and power over changing my meds without a doctor's notice. So that's one thing I had to fight with. But they did save my life. And this is a little piece of advice to some of you younger ones. Never get tempted to take an aspirin, no matter how small it is. I have heard it all my life. We've all heard it. Do not take aspirin. It'll cause bleeding. One day I had a migraine and we was headed to a marriage conference and we stopped at my mother-in-law's. And you would think after all these years she would keep Tylenol in the house, but she didn't. And I looked at it. I read the label, opened it up. Oh, that's a tiny little thing. Well, I took one, got rid of the headache, 5 days later, I went to the restroom. I just started feeling real faint and sweating and just real weird. And I went to the restroom, and then I looked, it was black. Went straight to the ER. I had been bleeding in my stomach pretty much ever since I took that aspirin. So for 5 days, I bled. So I'm fortunate enough, considering my age and growing up in Ohio, where hemophilia wasn't common. I didn't know any other hemophiliacs except my uncle and brother. We didn't go to any events. I didn't know that, there was chapters out there, if there were any that back then, which I'm sure there probably was a couple here and there. But I didn't know anything about the community. And I was a rough kid because we didn't know any better. We would fight. We would do everything that normal kids do, right? Jump our bikes, do all kinds of stuff. So I'm very fortunate, I would say, to be in as good shape that I'm in. Yes, I have aches and pains. I've had my knee replaced. My ankle's probably coming up to be replaced soon. But I just try and stay active as much as I can and just push through the pain. Another little bit of advice is painkillers. I've been taking painkillers, prescription painkillers, probably since the age of 7, 8. Started off with Tylenol 3s, right? And that was to get through the pain. As I got older, the pain increased. They would give me more. But I'll tell you this. Kaiser did not fill my script a couple years ago. It was on a Wednesday and I ran out. So I really went through it. I'm sorry. I took all the time. I'm sorry, Patrick. Cut it off. But I went through it. I was detoxing. And I was basically like just a junkie, a strung out junkie. And I didn't know before then that I was addicted and, all this stuff. But on a positive note, I noticed a couple of days after I didn't have any in my system, the pain was lessening. The pain was actually decreasing. So just keep that in mind. If anybody out there is taking prescription pain pills, just be mindful.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Taché. I live in the Pacific Northwest right now. I was born in 1978. I had a brother born in 1968, also with severe hemophilia. And then also my uncle, who was born in the 1930s, who also had severe hemophilia. So my mother knew to look for it. When I wasn't diagnosed right away when I was born, but my mother was looking for it. The hospital in Atlanta just misdiagnosed me and I had to go to a different hematologist. We moved around the South a lot when I was younger, and we moved to Pennsylvania for my dad's work. On the trip to Pennsylvania, my brother became very, very sick in the backseat of the car. Like he just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And that's when we learned that my brother had contracted HIV. And we went for the next couple of years just going in and out of the Hershey Hospital. And I had to watch my brother slowly decline and then eventually he would die. In that period of time, my mother did a lot of work for the Eastern Pennsylvania, the Delaware Valley chapter at that time of the Hemophilia Foundation, where she got to work with Ann Rogers. And we did a lot of stuff. And during that period of time, I was still young enough where I was on cryo at one point, but they moved me to factor right away. And I was so young that there weren't any involvement besides going to the summer camps. So I went to the Brandywine summer camp where I got to know a lot of other kids, also a lot of other kids with HIV and stuff, who I thought later on in my life, I'm glad I got back into the community because I thought originally that most of them had passed away. And it turned out a lot of them were still around and some of them are still like some of my best friends ever. My friend Gus, who still lives in Philadelphia, a great guy. I love seeing a lot of the other guys who I grew up with from the hemophilia chapter camp. And I spent my first early years in my 20s trying to avoid anything hemophilia related because I thought it was going to hurt my career. I wouldn't be able to admit it to anyone or anything like that. And it turns out that was the thing I embrace the most now is being able to volunteer and to be a part of this community. And I love it. I love the Blood Brothers, and you guys have made my life so much better. I love this community and I love being a part of it. And I love that the medication's gotten so much better. And I love that this community is still so very tight. We just recently got Blood Brothers back in Oregon. We had to give it up after COVID. And now we've just started doing our Blood Brother meeting again. We're doing it once a month, third Saturday of the month. Please reach out to the Pacific Northwest chapter if you get a chance to, and if you're in the area. Also, if look for your local chapter too, see if there's anyone in your area that can get you in touch with the HFA, the Blood Brothers program, and making it more. It's amazing to hear what people have gone through, and everyone has incredible stories.
Thank you, Matthew. And I want to use this opportunity, maybe Marc, before we go to DJ, is there anything that you can share about the vision for Blood Brotherhood moving into 2026, as long as we're all gathered?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. For HFA Blood Brotherhood, we used to have monthly chats. They paused during the pandemic and resumed for a little bit last year. The reality is that the uptake wasn't, or the participation wasn't quite the numbers that kind of sustained the program. Some of you did join it, which we appreciated. Blood Brotherhood is going to take a different form for a little bit starting next year. What I can share on this podcast is that we have launched a learning management system. It's within it is the Blood Brotherhood program. It's if you ever use Reddit, the social media Reddit, it's sort of like a discussion board where you just have to register for our platform and you're free to post, not whatever you want. We do have filters, but if you're experiencing something or just want to share your experience, it's there. And then so you have someone like myself, or there's another Blood Brotherhood on the HFA staff who will be monitoring these chats. And we go internally and say, hey, we are seeing a lot of posts about this particular topic, or there's a lot of questions about this. Maybe we should have a talk about this. We still want to see participation. We still want to give opportunities like this for you guys, like yourselves and everyone else, to share. Spaces like this where you can feel like I'm not alone. I don't feel alone in doing all this. So again, the plug for HFA's Blood Brotherhood program, just keep your eye out on what's coming. And thank you again for all we've shared so far. And again, still looking forward to hearing more stories.
Cool. Thank you for that update. Appreciate that, Marc. And speaking of stories, DJ, thanks for patiently waiting. You are up next. Go right ahead, sir.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. I just want to say thank you to Marc and Patrick for giving us this platform. My name is DJ Fowler. I'm 23. I live in Montana. I have von Willebrand's disease. And I just kind of want to share a little bit about my the challenges I've had with treatment and various different things. So I have a family history of it. My mom was diagnosed when she was 11. So having kids, she obviously knew that was a possibility. I didn't get diagnosed until I was 6, just due to the difficulties diagnosing von Willebrand's disease and how expensive the test is. So with that, when I got diagnosed, they kind of explain it to you a little bit. And they're like, well, because you have von Willebrand's disease, you're not going to have joint bleed. You won't have this and that. So moving forward in life, I started having all of those things. I started having joint bleeds. I started having increased bruising, nosebleeds, etc. And I would go to my doctor, my hematologist, and they're like, oh, no, that's fine. You don't have joint bleeds. You just have von Willebrand's disease. That doesn't happen. I didn't, and because of that, I didn't really have any treatment. My treatment was, well, you can treat with Humate when you're injured or when you have like surgery. So I didn't have any prophylactic treatment. I didn't have any repairs to any of the damage that was happening in my body through all that. When I moved to Montana when I was 14, so this was almost 10 years ago now, and I didn't even know what an HTC was until I was 16. I didn't even meet another person with a bleeding disorder that I wasn't related to, other than my mom, my little sister, and my little brother, until I moved to Montana and I met with a chapter. I had never gotten the ability to meet with anybody and hear those stories of like people experiencing the same thing as myself. So finally, when I met with a hematologist here in Montana, she finally told me, she's like, no, you are having joint bleeds. Like you are experiencing those things. Your feelings are valid. So I finally started to get treatment, but it wasn't prophylactic treatment at the time. That just what she was like, you don't need prophylactic treatment. You don't bleed that much. Move forward another 2 years of damage until I met with the HTC. And at this point, I'm 16, almost 17. So 17 years worth of joint bleeds and damage. And finally, when I met with them, they're like, no, we're going to put you on prophy. Like your joints are damaged. Like I had a whole comprehensive visit. They're like, you've had joint bleeds for the last 17 years untreated. So because of that, a lot of emotions hit you at once, right? Like you feel validated because everything you thought you were going through was true. But then also the anger hits you because you're like, well, I've been shouting this from the rooftops for as long as I can know, and it was unanswered. So because of that, you have to deal with all those emotions and process it to your own abilities. So now this is about 5 years later. since getting onto prophylactic treatment. And now I'm at the point where I'm just trying to repair the damage. I'm trying to play catch up from 17 years worth of damage. And I'm thankful that because they started me on prophylactic treatment as the guinea pig for my family, they got my little brother on treatment. They got my little sister on treatment. They got my mom on prophylactic treatment. So now they're able to get the care that they need. So that's the point I'm at. When I went to the HFA conference in March, I met with Marc, I met with everybody, and I kind of got to learn about like being an ambassador and like advocating. So that's the point where I'm at now, is just trying to advocate for care for people, especially in rural areas, just to have better health care and access to like treatment and HTCs.
DJ, I'm sorry for the struggles you've gone through, but I appreciate your perspective and your attitude. And I'm glad to have made your acquaintance tonight, man. Thanks for joining, and thanks for sharing your story. Jacob, you are up next, followed by Tyshawn and then Chris.
All right. My name's Jacob Bornhorst. I have severe hemophilia A, 23, and from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm talking about complicated grief. So diagnosed as a baby, and then a few months after I was born, I had a massive brain bleed, had to be rushed to the hospital. Very fortunate. I'm from Cleveland. Cleveland has one of the best hospitals in the Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals. So doctors didn't know if I was going to survive or not. Survived, but complicated. I had seizures. My whole left side's weaker than my right. I have no peripheral vision in my left eye. So growing up, it was always constantly, what's going to come first? The hemophilia part, the seizures. So the seizures took a first step, the hemophilia first. And then in like 2009, I had a second brain surgery to remove the scar tissue that was causing the seizures. My parents had to basically decide to cut the whole right side of my brain or just take the chunk that was causing the seizures. And no parent should have to go through, oh, are we going to have to just remove a whole half of my kid's brain? So that was very stressful for them. They eventually just removed the portion, even though removing the portion could still cause seizures, but I've been seizure-free ever since 2009. One of my main priority is now having a bleeding disorder. But yeah, growing up, didn't really notice it. I was always active, doing things. Mostly the vision thing was an issue, playing sports, soccer. I would just run kids over. I was a big kid and parents would be upset. My parents were like, he has no peripheral vision. And then as I grew, got taller, now 6'4", they're like, oh, you play basketball, play football. And I'm like, no, I can't. And then they're like, well, if I was your height, I would be able to do all this. I'm like, yeah, but you don't know all the stuff I had to go through. So eventually I got more involved with the Bleeding Disorder Foundation, went to Camp Old Eagle, was a counselor there, won a Team Impact Award in 2020, trying to get more involved in the Cleveland chapter. We just had an alumni event for the staff at Camp Old Eagle. So I'm just looking to get more involved.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you guys. I'm Tyshawn Constantine. I am 33 years old. I'm going to discuss wearing multiple hats and also a little bit about just the evolution. So growing up in New York City, Brooklyn, I've kind of just always been in a rough situation, walking a lot, dealing with a lot of family issues growing up. I have severe hemophilia A, and I had inhibitors that were tolerized when I was about 15 years old. I've always pretty much owned my condition just because things were very tough, like personal life wise, just kind of going through some things with my mom, parents in foster homes. My uncle and aunt was able to gain guardianship of me and become my legal parents when I was about 7. So the times when I did have bleeds, which was a lot, when I did miss school, I actually enjoyed being in a hospital because it was just like a nice, comfortable spot for me, which sounded kind of crazy. And then also just the benefit of being with my uncle and aunt, they wanted me to get exposure to things. They were very on top of making sure I knew how to advocate for myself. They attended a lot of the HTC meetings. And then I had the beauty of going to a lot of camp where I had the benefit of meeting some amazing people, not just from where I was, but just around the country or internationally. Fast forward a little bit later, I was a knucklehead. I like to just kind of ignore my bleeding disorder. So I do have some target joints and I was never really compliant. but I did still like appreciate the bleeding disorder. I remember going to my first Blood Brotherhood meeting in New York City. I was in college, kind of messing up, had to transfer out, and I was the youngest guy there. And I'm like, I had this great, excited energy about my bleeding disorder. Like, yeah, I get to travel, there's scholarships and market research and things like that. And folks were like, dude, you're so like unaware of what's going on. But it was good because I gained some good blood brothers that I have strong connections with now. I was allowed to do things personally with them, and then I own my perspective. So having that multiple hat situation, I work in industry now, but I've also worked in marketing for Him Libra pre-launch, which exposed me to a lot of the vernacular, the language, the things that I learned in college or whatnot. And it just allowed me to rub elbows with other people where I was able to work at the chapter for some years and then understand patient support specifically and see how technical things are in terms of just actually supporting others like me. And at the end of the day, it's married to me because it's in me, right? So going from the chapter now being at Sanofi, it's been a good experience for me, but it's also frustrating because I'm so passionate and genuine in all my interactions that sometimes just, solidifying a KPI or making sure I'm just checking things off a list just isn't the right way sometimes, but I'm blessed because I'm able to still help and have the resources to give back and still do cool things with the people that I love. But yeah, it's a lot, even down to the bad blood. I loved camp so much that I went to camps outside of hemophilia, and I've gained a lot of friends who've just had HIV and AIDS who I lost so many of them. So dealing with grief is something that I had to learn about as well. But yeah, my time's up, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to connect. And it's always good to hear everyone's stories. It's like a weight off because sometimes I'm always like smiling and everything is great. And yeah, you look fine. Things are cool. But when I have that bleed, sometimes I'm back to square one. Like I don't want to talk to anybody. I question if I'm going to ever be valued, like ever to work outside of hemophilia, or I question if I ever will be a good husband, a good parent, things of that sort, just because I can't walk sometimes. So that allowed me to kind of connect with some of the folks that kind of don't view me in that way. But thank you.
My name is Chris. I'm 67 years old and have severe hemophilia A, no history of inhibitors. I think that in many ways I grew up in hemophilic privilege, if one can say that there is such a thing. We can trace the family history in hindsight, probably back to 1860. But the real, modern day story in my family starts in 1950, right in the 1950s with my aunt who was born with moderate hemophilia A and was fantastically diagnosed in Philadelphia Children's Hospital, Philadelphia with hemophilia, even though that she was a female in the 1950s. They didn't know how or why, but they saw what was presenting in front of them and they treated it the way that it should have been treated. I have a brother that was a year older than me. And so when I came along in 1938, the doctors and the treatment, the processes weren't fixed. And my mother was a nurse and started working at the blood bank at the Children's Hospital, Philadelphia. And so we went on home treatment with plasma, fresh frozen plasma in the early 1960s. And then cryoprecipitate, as soon as that was becoming developed, we got our first factor concentrate products in 1969, 1970. And so, I didn't escape without any joint damage, but certainly was not as bad as the experiences of some that were in areas where diagnosis and treatment were further behind. And the home therapy situation was certainly crucial. And so progressed through the various treatment phases, from concentrates. I lived in Sweden for 4 years from 1981 to 1985. So I missed HIV and was put on heat treated product in Sweden as soon as that became developed in 1984. and then went into, monoclonals and recombinants and then extended half-life products. Didn't start prophylactic treatment until 2014. I thought that I could do almost as well doing, like early treatment, but, that was ridiculous. This is much better. And with extended half-life products and the improvements of extended half-life products, that's cut down on bleeding episodes pretty much altogether. Another thing about aging with hemophilia is the insurance issues and what it meant to feel like you had to have a job where you could have insurance through an employer. And if you got good insurance, you didn't want to change employment. So opportunities were lost from being able to change jobs or follow things like that. Also changes through community, being a kid and going to bleeding disorders conferences and things like that as a kid, and then dropping sort of out of the community with raising a family, and then getting back into it at a later age. And then also the physical changes that comes from, joint damage and things like that. Although I do have all my original parts, joint replacements at this point in time. But I am going through treatment for liver cancer at this point in time. Apparently 50 years of hepatitis C is not good for you. And I would encourage you all, if you've ever gotten any products or had any diagnosis with hepatitis C, to continue to get liver scans, not just liver enzyme testing. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you sharing. Ryan, you are up next, followed by Sid and then Hector. Ryan, the floor is yours, my friend.
I want to talk about complicated grief. I appreciate Marc, Patrick, that you guys kind of put that clinical list of what it exactly meant on the sheet, because I kind of went through it and was like, yep, check that, yep, check that, yep, check that. I'm 46 years old. I have survived Hep C, been clear now for 18 years. I don't know how I didn't get HIV. I just don't. And so I've lived for a very long time with survivor's guilt about that. I also, Chris, like you said, my mother was diagnosed as a woman with hemophilia back in the 50s as well, and then spent her entire life being argued with by people telling her, oh, it's not possible. Unfortunately, I lost her to Hep C complications about 20 years ago. So I've just always kind of dealt with a lot of grief, a lot of anger, a lot of not quite sure how to process the emotions that brought on by my bleeding disorder. And it took its toll. About 14 years ago, I tried to commit suicide the first time. And it just really have struggled with suicidal ideation for a number of years. It's something I still can find myself struggling with, because there's so much to deal with sometimes. There's so many things. There's so many levels to grief and to the things that we dealt with as children, the things that we deal with as an adult. But I am grateful for this community. It is because of this community that I didn't go through with one of my attempts. It is because of this community and people in this community that they were the ones who literally drove me to the hospital. They were the ones who made sure that I got the help that I needed. They were the ones who sat up with me to talk. And I cannot say thank you enough for that. But yes, talk to somebody, share what's going on, and get treatment.
And that powerful share from Ryan will conclude part 1 of our 3-part Blood Brothers series. But Marc, before we go, a lot came up just now, but since struggles with mental health and suicidality in particular came up, can you point listeners towards some HFA-supported mental health resources?
Absolutely. And thank you, Ryan, for bringing up a very important topic that people tend to shy away from. So HFA, we offer a number of mental health resources in a couple of different forms. So similar to this kind of podcast, we do offer multiple kind of support groups. We have our Blood Brotherhood. We have our Blood Sisterhood, which is for our women and girls with bleeding disorders. We have our Sangre Latina, which is for our Latino and Hispanic Spanish-speaking community, facilitated by a Latina bleeding disorder community member. And we also have which we just launched recently, our Black Voices Quarterly Check-in Call, which is a quarterly call for our Black and African American community with bleeding disorders to check in and just make sure that we're addressing the unique needs of our Black and African American community. We also have links on our website, hemophiliafed.org, to our Learning Central system, which is a sort of a online.
It's like a hub, right?
It's like, yeah, thank you, Patrick. It's our hub for educational content. It has educational resources on mental health, of course, talking about anxiety, depression, where to seek additional help, how to find a mental health provider. We also have information on advocacy, how you as a patient advocate or a community advocate can get involved. It's a huge resource that we just launched recently. We're very proud of it, so please check it out at hemophiliafed.org. And we also, for anything, also offer links to find a local member organization that you can connect with. Again, this is the state, regional, or again, local patient organization where you can connect with other people like you in your area, as well as hemophilia treatment centers. So back to you, Patrick.
A lot of good resources there. Thanks for shouting those out. And thanks as well to Bloodstream's presenting sponsor, Takeda, bleedingdisorders.com for more. And thanks to Genentech for supporting this 3-part series spotlighting the Blood Brothers. Visit hemophiliacommunity.com to learn more. Marc, it's great having you in studio.
Patrick, it was a pleasure to be here.
And listeners, we will be back in your feed again on December 12th with part 2. And with that, that is all for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Bloodstream podcast wherever you listen to have the next episode delivered to you the moment it goes live. You can also contact Bloodstream at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com or find us on social media. We're on all the things. I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm your guest host, Marc Pangolina.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.